Hello, so welcome to the latest episode of my house buying journey. So as some of you may already know, I am currently in the process of purchasing a property, and I thought it'd be a really great opportunity to be able to speak to Liam, who works at Money to the Masses and writes most of the property content, if not all of the property content on the site, and he has over 30 years of experience in the property industry. So I thought he could offer some brilliant insight into the process of purchasing a property, and also I wanted to speak to him about the steps and things that you should look out for when you are looking and viewing properties, and then also when you want to make an offer on a property, the steps that you should take. So Liam, if someone is in a position to start looking for a property, what would you suggest? What do they need to look out for?
Well, I think the first thing is to sit down and think about the type of property you want to purchase. What do you want to live in? How many bedrooms does it have? What area do you want to live in? And also you need to either speak to a mortgage advisor or go online and get some information about how much of mortgage you can afford with your salary or with your partner's salary included. Until you know this, you're really flying blind, because you're just looking at houses that you like the look of on a property portal, and you're not really knowing whether they suit what you want. And you could find yourself viewing a lot of properties and changing your mind along the way. It's much better to get fixed in your mind some basics that you would or wouldn't want in a property, and then you can start viewing. And obviously, once you see a property on a property portal or a property for sale board, approach the estate agent and they will book in a viewing at your convenience. Before you go on a viewing, though, it might be a good idea to just drive around and physically see the property, if that is possible, if you're buying in the location you live in currently.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, because me and my partner, obviously, we're buying a property, and we spoke to a mortgage advisor. And also, we actually spoke to a mortgage advisor quite early on, because I found it quite difficult to know exactly how much we would need to save for a deposit, because obviously we wanted a 90% loan to value, so we wanted a 10% deposit, but without knowing how much that we could borrow to buy a property, I didn't know exactly what deposit we would need to save, and I knew it'd be in the region of £20,000, but exactly what that was, we didn't know. So we spoke to the mortgage advisor, and then that gave us the opportunity to look on the apps such as Rightmove, to try and find out houses that we like. So if you do that, you find out exactly how much you can borrow, and then you know the price range of what properties you can afford. What would you do next? You then speak to the estate agent and book a viewing?
Yeah, book a viewing and go round to view the property, but you've got to view it with a critical eye. I know it's a property that you may, as soon as you walk through the door, fall in love with, but you should view it from what is wrong with this property rather than this is wonderful. Because especially if you're in your situation, you're a first-time buyer, most properties will look better than living in your mum and dad's bedroom or whatever. So you need to view it with a critical eye. Even from the point of at start in like parking your car, is the parking space? Can I get access to the property easily? And start looking at what sort of decorative order, what the carpet's like, what are the things you don't like about it? Is the garden big enough for your requirements? So the first thing I would say is go there with the right headspace to say, I'm going to look at this from a critical viewpoint, not a negative viewpoint, but a critical viewpoint.
Yeah, and I suppose that will help you to narrow down the properties. I know when we were looking at it, we did exactly the same thing, and just touching on your point that you said earlier about going around at different times, there was actually a property that we saw and we thought we'd quite liked it, but we drove past the property and we noticed that the neighbour had loads of tyres on their driveway, and they had a car which didn't have any tyres on and no windows in. And then from that, even though we initially liked the look of the property, we decided we didn't want to go and book a viewing because we weren't keen on living next door to that neighbour with all of those things on the driveway. Not saying that there was anything wrong with that particular, but just for our personal preferences, we didn't want to live next door to someone who would constantly be working on a car or have loads of tyres and car parts all over the drive. So that's really interesting as well. So So you would also suggest looking at different times as well, wouldn't you?
Yeah, there are different times even different times of the day. Go around and look at the area at night, in the evenings when people are home. How many cars are fighting for parking spaces? Are there a load of people out in the streets, like gathering in groups or whatever? What's it like at weekends? Is there suddenly an influx of people there at weekends? So you get a view in your mind of what the week is like living there. And once you add that to what the property is like, you're getting a fuller picture of the type of property you want to live in this property.
Yeah, and also I've heard that you should, if you like a property and you've looked at it with a critical eye and you decide that this property meets most of the things that you would expect, is it true that you should try to view a property more than once?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. It's going to be the biggest purchase you've made in your life so far. Why would you purchase that property with a 15-minute viewing? And I would suggest taking someone, even if they know nothing about properties, taking someone with a different viewpoint, because sometimes someone who just looks at it differently to you may pick out things, because when you're looking at it as the potential home buyer, you're probably getting excited that you're getting closer to your dream of owning your own home, and you're not seeing things that actually would be fairly obvious to someone else.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And we did that when we went to look at a property. I actually took my dad with me. He is someone that works in that type of industry. He's a plumber, so he was able to look at it from a different perspective as well. And like you say, it was nice to get an insight from someone else, because they do point out things. It is really, you do get caught up in the moment when you're looking at properties and can see yourself living there, that you do zone out and forget about things that potentially could cause a problem later down the line. So what tips do you have? Are there any things that you should ask, like the estate agent, when you're viewing a property or try and find out about property?
Yeah, there's questions you should ask both the estate agent and the owner of the property. The estate agent, you should ask them how many offers they've had on the property and how long has it been on the market, because that will give you a feel for whether this is perceived by other people as a good purchase. How many viewings have they had on the property? Just so you know that if this property's been on the market for some time and had very few viewings, you know that it's other people are not seeing it in a positive light. And if you know that information before you go to see the property, you will be better equipped when it comes to, if you want to make an offer, and where you should pitch that offer. So when you get into the property, you should ask the owner when he moved in, how long has he been living there, and what does he like about the property? What's his sort of favourite bit about the property? And so it gives you an idea of why they bought it in the first place. But also, why is he moving? Sometimes it's obvious because the wife's pregnant and having a bigger family and they need more bedrooms. Sometimes it's not so obvious, and they're the ones that you want to be thinking, is he moving because something, a big job is looming for repairing the house, or is it something more to do with the neighbourhood or the neighbours? And ask about the neighbours. You know, people don't have to answer your questions, but if you don't ask the questions, you'll never know. They might, even if they did dislike their neighbours, they probably wouldn't tell you outright, but they might give you some clues in their way they answer your question. Whether there's new neighbours moved in next door who are noisier than the other neighbours, etc., etc. And so ask them, what have they done to the property since they moved in? You know, what is the condition of the property when you moved in? How long have you had the cooker? How long these sort of things that you would need to know, so that give you a full picture of A, why they bought it, B, why it's not suitable anymore, and see what do they like about living there.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, and Liam has written really brilliant articles on viewing a property and things you should ask an estate agent, and I actually looked at those articles and read them before I went and viewed a property myself. So I did go in and ask those questions to the estate agent, and also you touched on previously about doing your research before you look at a property. That's really important, and that worked in my favour when I went to look at a property, because there was one in particular that I had noticed was up for sale previously with a different estate agent, and it was up for £30,000 more than what the current estate agent had put it on for. And it was really interesting because when we was asking the estate agent the questions like how long has the property been on the market for, they only told me how long the property had been on the market for with them. But because I'd previously known that this property had been on the market with another estate agent, I was aware that the property hadn't sold before and what were the reasons for it not selling. So that's really interesting that you've touched on that, and it shows you just how important it is to do your research before you look at a property. So if you find a property that you really like and you decide that you want to make an offer on the property, how do you make an offer on a property, and how much do you offer on a property?
Well, in most instances, you'll make an offer via the estate agent. Because if the property is on with the estate agent, you go back to the estate agent and tell them how much you're prepared to offer. With regard to how much you should offer, it's a balancing act, really. It's between you want to get a reasonable price for the property, but you don't want to upset the buyer, who may think if your offer is too low that you're being a bit disrespectful, if you follow what I mean. And they may then dismiss you when you come back with a higher offer. What I would suggest is, when you're thinking about your offer price, I would look at things that you feel maybe need repairing or fixing or upgrading, so that when you make an offer to them, you have a reason for making that offer. Not that you just pluck something out of the air, but you said, well, I'm offering, let's for argument's sake, say 5% below your asking price, because I think there's some work that needs doing on the property. And most people, when they move, they know there's stuff to be fixed. They wouldn't make the house in absolute tip-top condition and then sell it straight away. Most people know there's maybe things that, if they were staying there, they'd have to address. So they're more likely to accept an offer that had some reason behind it than just a blunt offer with just because you want it cheaper.
And if the property was advertised on the app, the property portal, as being offers in excess of or offers over, would you still think that that's okay to go in slightly lower, or is that going to be too low to potentially get accepted?
Again, it's a balancing act, I guess. I think estate agents use that offers over a certain price to try and stop offers. In other words, they try to say, well, I'm putting this on the market, let's say for 250, and I'll take offers over 250. But unless the market is very competitive, no one will offer over the bottom price. They'll always go in at the bottom price. So I think you can still go below that. Because if you don't think it's worth it, then go back to the estate agent and say, I'd like to offer below that price. And if they say, well, we can't put that forward, well, they're wrong, because they have to put every offer forward. Legally, they have to put every offer forward to the seller. So no harm in being a bit cheeky and getting in below that price. And again, if you've asked them how long the property's been on the market and how many offers they've had, you have a feel for whether there's a competition for the property. If there is and you really like the property, then maybe you need to offer the price or even higher if you're really keen on it. But it's a balancing act.
So what happens if you make an offer and your offer's rejected?
Well, then you've got to decide, are you going to go back and make a counter offer, or are you going to keep looking? You can go back and make a counter offer, and if you're really keen on it, you could offer the price that it was originally marketed for. So there's no danger in that. But if you offered a lower price because you had a really good reason, then you've got to think to yourself, say for argument's sake, you offered 10,000 below the asking price. You've got to ask yourself, I've lost £10,000 here, and these repairs and decorations that I thought a valid reason for offering less, I've got to pay for that as well. So it's a time where you reflect on it. I wouldn't go back too quickly and counter offer. Leave it, a week or so, and maybe if you want the property that badly, you move your offer price up.
If you make an offer and your offer is accepted, what are the next steps? What happens now?
Well, the estate agent will ask you some details. They'll ask you details about what solicitor you're using, what you're doing with regard to your mortgage. So you can give them as much information. You need to give them the solicitor, and quite often they'll advise or recommend a solicitor for you. But then the next thing, you need to go back to your mortgage advisor to start the ball rolling. So go back and speak to them and say, we found a property, what do I do next? And there'll be an application form, which is probably online, which they will get you to fill in or part complete for you, and you get the mortgage application into the lender. And it will take on a life of its own from that point, because next thing there'll be a survey required on the property, and really you don't have to do too much other than respond to requests from the solicitor or from the mortgage advisor, and the thing takes its own course. Unfortunately, it's not very quick, and it all depends on who else is in the chain. And if you're a first-time buyer, as you are, the chain could be really lengthy, but it could be 4 or 5 people in a chain, and you're reliant on all that chain keeping together for the next 3 months before you can move into your house. So it's basically just sit, fingers crossed, and do what's asked of you.
Yeah, that's great. That's really helpful. Thank you. It's really insightful, and hopefully it's helped people who are in the same position as me and then are unsure of what to do and how to go and look at a property. So just before we finish, do you have some key takeaways or key tips that you would share with someone who is in the position of looking for a property?
I think my number one tip is do your research, because before you look at properties, because these days there's a tendency for with the property portals, it's good fun sitting there when you think of you would like to buy a house, looking at the property portals day and night. Oh, we could afford this, I could afford that, and it's okay, but if you need to pin that down a bit, but otherwise you'll be looking at that forever. You need to understand what is acceptable in a new property, what is not acceptable, what location would you live in, what location wouldn't you live in, and you've got to do that if you've got a partner buying with you in agreement with each other. So you will come up with a blueprint of the property. So that's tip number one, do your research. Tip number two, I think, is contact a mortgage advisor early in the journey, because there are things that you might need to get in place, i.e. paperwork, understand your salaries and how you're actually paid. It's very easy to, particularly with a salary, to look at things with rose-tinted specs and look at if you get bonuses, to say, oh yeah, but I earned this and I earned that. What a lender will want is a consistent income and proof that all these bonuses that you're getting are provable. So you need to do some research along those lines, and also you need to check your credit score, because if you don't check your credit score, you may have a nasty surprise when you go to apply for a mortgage that actually they won't lend to you because your credit score isn't good. So there would be the research and speaking to a mortgage advisor. At that point, you'll know the type of property you want and whether you can get a mortgage. You like the property, and if it's in good enough condition, and all those things about the property. But before that, you need to do your research in the type of property you want and whether you can get a mortgage.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. That's been really insightful. So if you have any questions about the house buying process, then be sure to email me, lauren@moneytothemasses.com, and make sure you keep an eye out for the next stage in my house buying process.